So, Warren, how worried are you that the South Australian Labor government, obviously very good at politics, right? Sunday, middle, all of that, right? Like the theatre's great. But they keep the handbrake on the voice so nothing crazy comes out and everyone gets to say, look how good it is in South Australia. What concerns, if any, just again, raw politics, right?
Yeah, raw politics. Look, first of all, I've got to say that I love Peter Malinakis because I work for him, and he got me to do the inquiry into prisons and reoffending and that, and we come up with some really good stuff. Look, it is a dangerous game for them to play. Because when you're leading up to the referendum here nationally, this could go very sour for them, and so it's going to be a lot of work in the background to make sure it doesn't go sour for them. I don't support the voice, and there's many reasons why I don't. One of all is built on this falsehood that Aboriginals don't have a voice. We've always had a voice. And I just found it interesting when Albo was on stage the other day talking about a bottom up, not a top down, and he said, like these people on the stage, and everyone on the stage were all public servants, were all people who have been at the top end of and running Aboriginal affairs for the last 30 years, and so all the problems of Aboriginal affairs probably goes back to them, and so I just. And at the same time, I'm a very strong believer in what we have been doing in the last 15 years in regard to lifting better things off. It's interesting, and I can tell you a lot of stories about Ken Wyatt, and I'll be telling a lot of stories about him over the next few months about what he did with Aboriginal education and many other things. Right. And so, look, this is... again, we set up a policy in 2015 about, because I don't know any race of people in the world who's ever got out of poverty without education and economic development.
Correct.
None. Economic, and we put a policy in place. $6.7 million was the Indigenous business sector in the 1st of July 2015. Today, 8 years later, it is worth $8.7 billion, has created 22,000 new jobs, has got education programs where we're getting thousands of people through universities and stuff like that. The problem isn't between Aboriginals and non-Aboriginal. You look at the problem is between Aboriginals in the regional and remote Australia, like white Australians in regional, and people living in the cities and large provincial towns. Correct. So we should be focusing on what's on the ground. And a bunch of people like Albo put up on that stage who have been in charge of Aboriginal affairs for years are not going to flip over overnight. Right. And I know these people too well.
No, well, this is it. But Gary, because we have a third person here, I don't want to be rude, and I want to get Gary's view on it as well, right? Which is, again, I can see what's going to happen here, which is that if it works out, this is going to be the template which everyone says is the example of it working out. But if it starts to go silly, you expect a whole bunch of leftists to say, oh, but our voice is different. Our one's different.
Paul, I found it amazing that they said that until today, Aboriginal Australians living in South Australia weren't being listened to by their parliament. I just cannot believe that for the life of me. And apparently with the stroke of a pen, this suddenly is now no longer the case. And so I think shame on everybody who's ever been a member of parliament in South Australia if you haven't been dealing with Aboriginal people in your electorate. That's a disgrace. But look, Paul, the thing is, they're not changing the Australian Constitution, are they? All they're doing is setting up a mechanism that's going to look good. It's going to deal with people in South Australia. I mean, look at the overtime that was spent on the announcement today. I mean, a whole lot of people were, of course, clapping and cheering because they brought half the public service out onto the street. But Paul, in all seriousness, it's not changing the Australian Constitution. It's not putting a racial-based difference in the Australian Constitution. It's not creating a circumstance whereby the purchase of submarines being built in South Australia is going to have to be referred back to people who claim traditional ownership of where the submarines are being built. And we're not going to be paying land rates, are we? Necessarily because they want some sort of money paid back to them as traditional owners. So, Paul, I don't know. That's just not changing the Constitution. So the best thing that come out of South Australia is the wine, and the best stuff that goes in is the water, and I just don't really follow much of what goes on in South Australia.